Hello everybody. I'm really excited today as we have Beth here from Little Fusspot. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah. I'm the founder and owner of Halia Rose. And as you know, we're kind of all about mums and children and improving and I suppose embracing kind of family life, and part of that is healthy eating. So I'm really excited to have Beth here today to kind of share her knowledge and answer any questions that you might have. So before I kind of introduce her, if you do have any questions, then feel free to pop them into the comments and we'll do our best to answer everything during the live session. If you're catching this as a replay, then just put #replay and we can come back in and answer anything that you might have as well. So so without further ado, Beth, if you'd like to kind of introduce yourself, tell us a little bit of background about what you do and how you help families, and then we can kind of move into some of the topics and questions that we've got today.
Okay, hi, Beth Bonfilio. I'm a clinical nutritionist and also the founder of Little Fusspot. Now, the journey I embarked on started when my son was 1. He was an extremely phobic of quite a lot of foods, in particular green foods. I was already a nutritionist. I studied in the UK, so I needed to further my to be able to help him and get him to just eat a wide range of foods and foods that are obviously nutritious. I took him from pills to get help, but unfortunately there wasn't really anyone that could specifically deal with the sensory issues he was having around.
I think that's where a lot of our kind of businesses come from.
Pardon?
I was going to say, I think that's where a lot of our businesses come from, isn't it? Is to kind of, we're experiencing issues as ourselves or families, and we want to kind of help our families and ourselves, and then kind of look into ways that we can then help other people.
Well, nutrition's always been my passion anyway, and so has my mum was a naturopath, so it was, I guess, a logical to follow, just that I didn't realise exactly what direction it was going to take me, but it fulfills me in so many ways, helping people go from those meal times that I used to experience myself. Having a child willingly eat a healthy plate of food on their own accord is it doesn't get old. It's the it's the best ever.
Definitely. And so I guess kind of it would be good to start with, what is healthy? What does healthy eating mean to, we all probably have our own slight variations on what kind of healthy is, but from a kind of nutritionist perspective, it'd be really good to kind of start with that area, I guess.
Well, I think the important thing to, I guess everyone starts from a different platform. So you'll get people who aren't really too educated about food. I mean, I think you really need to be living under a rock not to have some kind of knowledge of health, because I mean, everyone's got access to media. There's always blogs and articles being shared. I'm always sharing it. And that's where a lot of information is. So everyone comes from a pretty good base ground of health as to what we probably would have experienced before Facebook and Instagram. But what I don't have fad diets whatsoever. I loosely have a hybrid diet myself that I follow, which is a little bit of paleo. However, I still encourage people to have things like potatoes and things like that in their diet, because that's really quite important for prebiotics. Mm-hmm. So I think what nutrition, I believe, based around your gut health. Mm-hmm. If your gut is healthy, we know now that is stemmed to quite a lot of behavioural issues, depression, anxiety. So you keep that gut healthy, and that's what we strive for.
Definitely. Yeah, I've been reading a lot about kind of gut health, and we've had some kind of family members that have been suffering with kind of gut issues themselves, and it's been really interesting to kind of further develop my knowledge on what is a healthy gut and how you can kind of take it back to make it healthy as well. So I guess kind of we start our kind of eating journeys as babies when we start weaning, and for a lot of people, that kind of weaning journey can seem quite daunting or quite scary. So is it, it would be good to kind of get your tips on I know there's the kind of, I suppose there's two types of weaning, isn't there? Or a combination, whether it's baby-led weaning or whether it's, sticking to kind of purees and building up into kind of lumpier foods. And, for me, I did a bit of a combination of both with both of my children, and that worked well for us. And it's whatever suits you and your kind of views, I think, isn't it? But is there I don't want to say right way, but is there, a better way from a kind of nutrition perspective?
Yeah, there is. I mean, I did the same. I mean, well, I had two children in two different, I guess, eras when it came to baby-led weaning. So my son came in this where um, absolutely very about what current methods are for weaning. So he was a spoon-fed puree baby, and I knew no different. And I followed books as to I had probably the most funky combinations of things mixed up. I had black beans mixed with baked beetroot with cinnamon, because I knew that all these individual ingredients meant something in the world, but just really undoing his, I guess, interest in food. I mean, it didn't look good. It didn't probably taste good going down. There's that way. I guess what I did in that effect, and then so I had Georgia a couple of years later, and I'd moved at that point. And in Australia, I felt like we had a lot more information to hand. I also saw that a lot of friends were doing the baby-led weaning. A friend of mine, we sat at a picnic, and the 2-year-old was sitting down and just eating a plate of sushi, and that just blew my mind. And I needed to know how she was feeding her child, and we talked about baby passion to know everything about it. So I do believe the baby-led weaning is probably the most preferred way, and the reason why is because they're engaging with their senses right from day dot.
Mm-hmm.
It also encompasses so many skills that the child have if they're not encouraged to have control over their own hunger, self-supply, and self-nourishment. Yeah. So I think for that reason, I do prefer and I would suggest weaning, however, right. Because sometimes a parent's anxiety can outweigh, I guess, the stages of baby, I guess, the gagging /
Yeah, no, I think that's fair enough. And I think one of the other concerns that I sort of heard when I was kind of doing weaning from other parents was, how do you know that they're getting enough? Like with spoon fed, and you're kind of, you're giving it to them, that they're getting enough of the sort of, food inside them. When they're kind of, picking it up and not playing with it, but kind of exploring it, how do you know that they're getting enough of the right stuff?
Well, I guess you really don't from the outset. And when you're start baby-led weaning with a baby for the first month, well, it can even be longer. It depends how long it takes to get the hang of it. But you normally wait for those ready signs that the gag reflex has dissipated or starting. And you also have a look at signs that they're being, I guess, more aware around them. They're more encouraged to try things. But I guess on average, you can probably expect that a child is not going to swallow too much for the first couple of weeks. And when they do, be a teaspoon here and a teaspoon there, of course, you've got a backup supply of nutrition that the child's had since day dot. So it's really just about teaching a child how to self-nourish. Yeah. But saying that, though, I believe that without that way and trying to take the spoon, you're, I guess, teaching a child that they don't have the control over the and you bypass that. That's what really affects around mealtimes. When he takes control.
Yeah, and it is important, isn't it? It's really important that they kind of learn how to use cutlery or use their fingers and that kind of thing. So it's it's a huge area. One of the questions that we've had come up actually is that from Becca, that her little girl is 8 months old and is eating a variety of solids, but how can she ensure that she doesn't turn into a fussy eater?
A child can still turn into a fussy eater even after being baby-led weaned. But just to give you a couple of statistics, out of 10 people I treat, only 1 in 10 would have been a baby-led weaned baby. And there's a couple of areas where it can go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
When I was speaking to a client earlier, and this is something I hadn't really considered. She phoned up, was 17 months old, and she said, we like to eat stews and tacos and things that are of a mixed consistency, and and our child won't eat that, won't eat vegetables. And I said, okay, well, I said, how did you start? You know, I went through the whole process, and she said, baby-led weaned. And she said, but I'm of the belief that the child should eat what we're eating. And I said, yes, it needs to be towards their preference. We all have preferences. We're born with them, and it's the fingerprint of our existence and the things that we prefer. You know, you like, you know, we obviously both like navy blue to wear, but, you know, it might be something that someone else doesn't like. So a child is exactly the same. They're born with their own preferences. And when they're younger, they tend to have preferences towards consistency, beige, crunch, not so much salty, but normally sweet. And when you're serving up foods that don't, they will lose interest pretty quickly, even if you've started through a baby-led wean process. So there's one, I guess, scenario. You still need to be mindful of what their preferences are.
Yeah.
And if it is, cook it to the way they like it. Another thing that's, I guess, the train can go off the track is that when a parent relies a little too heavily on one food group, and one food group that particularly is the bane of my existence, I guess is the bane of my business existence, is dairy. You often find that when a child is a fussy eater and taken off to the doctor or any type of, I guess, health practitioner, they'll often say, well, your child's on the percentile, just add more milk to the diet, therefore they're getting everything they need. And unfortunately, that's not the best advice. And I've found that with that advice, parents tend to increase the amount of dairy, and therefore, obviously, the child's having much less interest in food.
Yeah.
So things can sort of go by the wayside that way. But it's also looking at the child's signs that perhaps they're not tolerating some of the foods that you're giving them. So quite often I get a lot of children that aren't going to the toilet daily, which means that the digestive system is really sluggish or might have a slow gastric emptying. And in that case, we need to remove what the cause is. It may not be dairy, it might be something else. So then we look towards intolerances as to why this child who's had a really great sensory experience in life has now turned off all foods and seemingly not hungry at all.
Yeah, I think it's just looking at all different aspects as well, isn't it? As you say, it's kind of, yes, you want the babies to eat what you're eating. For one, it makes life a lot easier if you're just cooking one thing. But I think it's being mindful of what they will eat and what they want to eat as well, so that you're kind of encouraging them to do it and that they will be open to eating that food as well. And then I guess from a kind of, you know, I suppose looking at kind of all the different food groups and that kind of thing, as you said earlier, one of the kind of key things that you find is the kind of green foods and the vegetables and things like that that seem to just have this kind of stigma around them that either kids are not going to enjoy them or they're the kind of tricky foods to encourage children to eat. Do you encourage people to kind of hide greens? I know we've been talking about kind of baby-led weaning, but do you encourage people to hide greens in the food that they're making? Or is it just a case of actually, you know, serve green as part of that meal and encourage them to keep trying things?
I guess when I started out putting together menu plans for families, I was really dead set against not hiding things because obviously they're not being aware of it. But then you get this child that comes along that literally eats bread, rice crackers, biscuits, milk, and not much else with regards to nutrition. And that's when you got to say, look, this child needs nutrition to want nutrition. Okay, so that's when you start having to hide it. But the course that I put together eliminates having to do that because we really want the child to be mindful of real whole foods. So in that case, what I recommend is that when you're preparing something, you give the child a lot of awareness of that food prior to serving it up. So food goes through what we call a process where first of all, you've got to map out what they like and what they don't like, what textures they like. and how that vegetable, well, what vegetables would resemble that texture, or what would be the closest thing that they would try, and start building with a whole range of different I guess techniques. We start to build foods into their diet. But if we start from nothing at all, we might even just start with a fruit juice and just maybe add half a carrot to it, just to be able to get started somewhere.
Okay, so I guess depends on where the kind of level of kind of nutrition is
Yeah,
at the moment.
that's right. Like I said, everyone starts on a different playing field when they come
Yeah.
to me, and it also depends on the child's age as well, as to what approach we take, I guess.
Yeah. Actually, Rose has just come on with a question which is very topical as we're just talking about it. She said her eldest was baby-led weaned. He's 7 now, and he eats a pretty limited diet. And same with her 3-year-old. They're really resistant to new foods. So I guess there's kind of a question in there around how to introduce new foods, but also how to expand that kind of limited diet and add other things.
Okay. I guess the best way to answer that is to sort of give you an idea of how I would start a conversation with a person like that. So I think the first thing that I would recommend in that situation is we need to find out whether this is a problem feeder scenario, or whether this is just a picky eater, is something that they're going to grow out of. And certainly the 7-year-old sounds like we're heading into problem territory. And I imagine she's probably super worried about the 3-year-old heading down the same track.
Mm.
Um, I guess the way I would start a conversation. So what I do with or anyone who's wanting to just take a little look inside of the course is I have a free 15-minute conversation which I have with people. And the first thing I do is try to decide whether this is a problem feeder. So therefore, some of the main criteria for a problem feeder is that they are quite fearful around food, missing 1 or 2 food groups, very limited with regards to what textures and what sensory preferences they have around food, and there's a few other criteria. If it's a problem feeder, it's just a case of might eat 3 or 4 vegetables, but doesn't like them cooked 6 different ways. That's not really a problem feeder, and they're not really the type of families I do like to help. But with regards to her question, it would probably take me hours to answer and give her help without knowing exactly what the cause is. But the first thing I need to find out is what the cause is, and I can normally work out what the cause is in the first 15 minutes of a call.
Okay, that's brilliant. Rose just said, yes, she is worried about her 3-year-old. So yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? If the elder child is fussy, that you then kind of, the younger ones learn so much from their elder siblings and kind of watch and copy as well. So it can be quite a tricky situation to kind of manage that.
I get a lot of mums calling me on their in the last trimester of their pregnancy, trying to fix their first child before the second child comes along. You have no idea how often that happens.
That's really interesting, actually, isn't it? It's that kind of planning ahead and knowing that it can kind of affect the younger ones as well. And I guess part of that is as us as adults, if we're eating kind of a healthy, balanced diet, then children watch that and they kind of see as well. So,
it doesn't always happen that way, unfortunately. There are reasons for why that won't happen.
Yeah.
I mean, sensory processing disorders. I mean, you probably know that autism is something that is diagnosed 1 out of, I think, 4 boys, or 1 out of 5 boys either has tendencies around, or I guess symptoms of autism, and with that normally comes a sensory processing disorder. And so some of the questions that I ask around meeting a parent for the first time is all around their developmental milestones. And of course, I'm not going to diagnose a child with autism, in the first 15 minutes of meeting them, but I might start to put in my own head, there's something there sensory wise. And of course, the course will still cover that. But that can also be a cause that even if they sat down and saw everyone eating a healthy salad 3 times a day, they're still not going to eat it, because they have real problems with the way that their brain processes the information that comes from their fingers, their mouth, their nose, their eyes. And it just doesn't connect very well, and it needs to be taught how to use those receptors, those sensory receptors, really well.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because I think the more you kind of look into it and the more that you explore kind of nutrition, there's so many things that are kind of can affect it and that are kind of part of it. One question I've got actually from a personal experience. So my little boy's just started school in September, and he generally has always been a pretty good eater and, you know, really varied diet. Since he started school, he's become not picky, but there's definitely tendencies to, oh, I'm not going to eat that because so-and-so doesn't eat that at school. And it's really interesting to kind of, I can't be there all the time. I'm not there at lunchtime when he's having his school lunches, but it's been a really interesting learning for me that there's, so many outside influences can affect kind of what they're eating and what they're choosing. So, it's taken a little bit of time, what kind of 3 months, I guess we're into school now, of, still kind of almost not going back to scratch, but kind of re-encouraging him to try things and still eat things. And, rather than the, oh, well, my friend doesn't like that, so I'm not going to have it either. So it's been interesting.
Yeah. I have a conversation with my son, and I also have an open dialogue with him around good bugs and bad bugs. Okay, so like you said before, where do I base nutrition is all about the bugs. So he's so good with this conversation that so say for instance Christmas time, there's the calendar that they open up every day and they get a sweet outside. If he has a sweet or something like that, he knows that the bad bugs are going to love that sweet. And he has to combat that with something else. Now, he might have a good bug juice where he puts a probiotic in a juice, or he might make himself a vegetable juice, or he might have himself a cucumber out of the fridge to counteract that. But that's the dialogue that I have with my son. Another thing that we like to do is cook with his friends. And now this is something that I usually do in the holidays, or I go to the school and do it with a couple of his kids in the actual school. It's a program they have there. It's fantastic. And quite often I've gone in there with, they'd love me to cook cookies all day, but last time I went in there, I brought the juicer in, and we all chose what vegetables and fruits we wanted and to make a juice. And he just absolutely loved that everybody was, interested in making a juice and drinking it. It was fantastic. And I had 2 fussy eaters in that group of 4, and I got them both to have a vegetable juice.
It's amazing. I think that's the other part of it, actually, because I've always encouraged my children to help me when I'm cooking and when I'm shopping as well, so that we can go around and kind of talk about the different fruits and vegetables and what goes into various things. And I found that when, they're involved in the cooking and the preparation, and this isn't possible, obviously, every mealtime, but they're much more into and interested in kind of eating it because they feel like it's theirs and that they've created something as well. So I think it's probably part of that with the juices, that it's, something like that.
Juices are great. I get a lot of families juicing with their kids. That's great. But like you said before, with the cooking in the kitchen, it's twofold. The one of the definitions of ARFID, which is one of the it's a very new eating disorder that's being diagnosed for children around about the age of 10 years old who are extremely picky eaters and tend to hide away from food and really, really limit what they're eating. One of the definitions of that is literally an unawareness of food. So if you're getting your child to help out in the kitchen, you're not just having them be aware of that food. Think of all the motor skills and all the measuring and the mathematics and the vocabulary that you're engaging with them just by, you have to be in the kitchen anyway. So why not get them in there and just doing, a small task every now and then. But another thing it does is that when children are unaware of something, their amygdala part of the brain is going to be on high alert until they get used to something. So the more you can have a child in the kitchen around that food. At the moment with my son, we're working with avocado and we're slowly getting there. He will eat a small piece in a salad, but that is it. The more you can have them around, the more processing time they have around that food. So if I'm going to put avocado in my son's salad, I will get him to come in and slice. I'll cut it in half, but he'll slice the little grooves in it so that when we pop it out, he's at least had interaction and knows that that's coming on his plate, and it gives him a little time for his brain to process and the amygdala just to calm down a little bit and not be on high alert that there's something on the plate that he's not going to expect.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. One of the other things that I wanted to cover, I know we're sort of running out of time, but was Christmas is coming, and obviously there's a lot more kind of party foods and treats around, and as you say, advent calendars and things like that. you know, what are your tips to kind of help manage that, or kind of counterbalance it, that we were sort of talking about earlier?
I guess counterbalance would obviously just to be making sure maybe throughout the month of December to have a probiotic drink on standby every day. That can't hurt.
Yeah.
And I think in the UK at the moment, you've obviously got the colder weather as well.
Yeah.
So, and everyone's going to be sharing their germs with each other.
Yeah.
So I think a probiotic is probably a really good tip. Another good tip, I think, would be to get lots of vitamin D, especially if you are in the UK, because if you're obviously calcium really isn't absorbed without vitamin D, and if you're not getting a lot of it, then calcium would obviously be lacking. So vitamin D is a good one to obviously maintain good health. But I just finished writing a blog which I haven't put up yet. When children are around a lot of so the amygdala part of the brain, like I mentioned before, is the exciting area of the brain. So this gets really overworn in a child when they're around Christmas time, because they're excited about the anticipation of Christmas, and they're they're excited about Santa and excited about presents and all of this, and it really gets overworked. Plus there might be a little of anxiety around Santa coming into his house when he's asleep, and there's just it really gets worked over time. I think if you're trying to work any type of program around your child being a healthy eater, December is really not the good time for that at all. And if you've got wild expectations of your child sitting at a dinner table with all the adults and sitting there and eating food that he's never tried before in a really highly sensory environment, forget it, because you'll end up ruining your own Christmas day in the process.
Yeah, I think that's a good tip, isn't it? Kind of take it for what it is, and perhaps December is not the best time to start. And
it's not the best time. That Christmas Day is not the best time to start any type of, I guess, manners at the table. I think in the blog I wrote, when you're on your way to the relative's house, put a bento box on the lap so that they're at least filled up before they get there, and then just fill it up on the way back and let them eat on the way back. They're only going to want to play with their toys anyway and play with their cousins. So just allow that to happen, I think.
Take the pressure off them and you, I guess, isn't it? It's just that time. Yeah,
absolutely.
Oh, it's been fabulous talking to you, and kind of lots of kind of good things I think have come out of it. I know you've got a couple of courses running at the moment, so if you want to talk about those, I know you've got a free one and also sort of the next level up from there. So yeah, I'd love it if you could share a bit more information.
Sure. The free one, a lot of people like the free one because it gets people results, especially if you've just got a fussy eater that's a bit reluctant to try foods. And what it will do, it gives you access to this here, which is a visual chart helping a child to re-engage with their senses with regards to tasting foods. It's also got a couple of clinic demonstration videos there on how best to use that chart as well. If you find that you've got a little bit more than that, at the end of that free course, you'll be led into booking an appointment with me. And then you may want to decide to go into the full course. Now, we're leading up to Christmas, and for the first time in 5 years, I'm actually taking annual leave this year. And on the 20th of December, the course won't be available until next year. So because of that, I'm offering 20% off, because with every course I offer a 45-minute consultation, and that won't be able to be taken until February when I get back online. There is lots of support in an online forum, and I am contactable on email. It'll just be a little slow, but just that one-on-one contact will just be won't be available while I'm away. But to head to that information, there's two ways you can do that. You can just type in www.courses.littlefusspot.com. Otherwise, just go to littlefusspot.com and click on courses, and it will take you to that page as well.
I'll pop the links into the comments so everyone's got those, and then
thank you.
In one place.
Thanks very much.
Oh, it's been brilliant talking to you, and I hope everyone who's been watching, we've had quite a few viewers and comments, so hope you've all enjoyed it. If you're watching this on replay, as I said earlier, then just put #replay, and if you've got any specific questions, then myself or Beth will hopefully be able to answer those.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, Beth's got a Facebook group, she's got a website, all across social media as well, so we'll add the links into there so that you can find her as well, and just get some inspiration on kind of healthy eating and enjoying family meal times with your children as well. So thanks very much, Beth. It's been lovely chatting to you.
Thank you.
And we'll put the links into the comments so everyone's got those.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks very much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.